This is Stories by Meek Banks, a place for short stories and reflections meant to help you unwind your mind. Let's get into today's episode.
He said I flinched like a stray dog,
Then laughed like that was a compliment. I didn't say a word, just stared at the eggs turning to rubber in the pan, yolks curling in on themselves like they were ashamed. The smell was sharp, burnt and bitter, like scorched toast and bad memories.
The fire alarm didn't go off.
I took the battery out last fall after Aaron yanked it down during one of his moods. Said it beat like it was accusing him. I didn't argue. I just got a broom to clean up the plastic pieces and made sure the kids stayed in their rooms. The shower upstairs kicked on. Pipes groaned behind the walls, loud and aching like old knees. He was awake. I had 10, maybe 15 minutes before he came downstairs asking what smelled like failure. I reached for the cinnamon, not because I needed it, but because the kids liked it on oatmeal. And that's when I saw it, tucked behind the spice rack like it had been hiding. A square of paper folded into itself. Yellowing edges, damp at the corners. I opened it slowly. I hate what I become when I drink. I hate how she looks at me, like I'm wearing her husband's skin. I stood there, staring. The ink bled in a few places, maybe from heat or time, but the handwriting was his, Aaron's. It didn't make sense. He didn't write things like this. Hell, he barely texted full sentences. Emotions were for other people. Soft men, white men, not him. But the R's curved the way his always did, like they'd grown tired halfway through. I read it again, lips barely moving, then folded it up and slipped it into my bra next to the heart that had learned to slow itself when it heard heavy footsteps. The shower turned off. I dumped the burnt eggs, wiped the pan clean, and started over. Scrambled, no milk, extra salt. That's how he liked them. I'd made those eggs 4 different ways over the years, depending on which version of him came downstairs. This one didn't speak, just scrolled through his phone while I placed the plate in front of him. One of the twins giggled from the living room. I hushed her. He didn't like noise in the morning. Eggs again? He said, but he ate them. After he left, I sat alone at the kitchen table with my tea gone cold, the note beside it like something holy and dangerous. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it wasn't nothing either. The second note was in my left boot. I found it on a Tuesday, digging through the closet for something warmer than the thin flats I'd worn to walk the twins to school. The wind had a bite to it, and the boots, black leather scuffed at the heel, hadn't fit right since my last pregnancy. But when I tipped one over, the paper slipped out and fluttered to the floor like it had been waiting for me. Some men inherit their father's watch. I got the bottle. And the backhand. I read it standing up, coat half on, my breath hitching in my throat. The ink was heavier this time. More pressure, more intention. A smear on the bottom corner like someone wiped their nose after crying or bleeding. I folded it carefully, like it was something sacred and dangerous, and slipped it into the sock drawer under the unsent Christmas cards. By Thursday, I'd found 4 more behind the toilet tank, in the basement next to the water heater, stuffed between couch cushions. One inside the box of off-brand cereal the kids didn't like. Each one was like a dropped match. And God help me, I kept picking them up. I black out sometimes. I see red. Then I see her. and I want to crawl inside the floor. I said I'd never be like him. I said it while watching him knock out my uncle's tooth. I said it while clutching a loose baby tooth of my own in the dark. She deserves better than a man who prays he forgets what he does. They weren't dated. Most weren't even signed. But they had Aaron's hand. Not the Aaron who stood behind me and said things like, "You're lucky I stayed." This was a version of him I didn't recognize. Someone crumpled and human. Someone afraid. And it made my stomach turn. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because a part of me did. He was unpredictable that week. Monday morning, sweet, called me baby and brought me tea in a chipped mug. Monday night, snarling, threw my keys at the wall because I forgot to buy the right kind of juice. Tuesday afternoon, flirted with me while folding laundry. Wednesday morning, silence. The kind that felt like someone holding their breath before swinging. When I asked tentatively, while we watched a rerun on the couch, "Do you ever write things down like when you're upset?" He snorted. "Now I'm keeping a diary? What am I, 16? I smiled small and let it go. He didn't notice my knuckles were white. That night, I found one more note, hidden under the liner in the junk drawer. It was older. The paper was yellowing more than the rest, edges frayed like it had been read too many times. She said I wasn't drinking so much back then, but I was. I just hid it better. The trick is to sip between the kindness. I sank to the floor. The twins were asleep upstairs. The dishwasher was humming. Somewhere outside, a dog barked, once, then again. But I heard nothing but that sentence. It echoed through me. Back then, I just hid it better. I tried to do the math. That note was before the night he broke the bathroom mirror, before the bruises I explained to my oldest daughter as an accident, before the quiet mornings when the smell of whiskey hung in the air like old sweat. He'd been drinking longer than I thought. Maybe always. I couldn't remember when he started. Only when I noticed. That shook me. Later, I stood in front of the mirror and touched the spot just under my collarbone, where one of the first bruises ever bloomed. I remembered how I covered it with foundation, then with the scarf, then with silence. I opened the drawer, took out all the notes, laid them flat in a row. I couldn't stop staring at them. This wasn't healing. This wasn't hope. This was a man burying confessions for someone else to find and leaving no apology behind. Still, I kept them because somewhere between the ink and the folds, I started seeing the outline of a truth I hadn't dared name yet. I wasn't living with one man. I was living with two, and neither one was safe. It was the furnace that led me there. The twins had been complaining about the cold all morning, stomping around the kitchen in mismatched socks and hoodies zipped to the throat. I told them the heat was fine, but when I checked the thermostat, it was blinking like it had something to say. Aaron hadn't lit the pilot yet this season. Said it was too early, even though the windows had started frosting at the corners. So I pulled on my thick socks, grabbed the flashlight, and opened the basement door. Cold air wrapped around my ankles like a warning. The basement always smelled like concrete and old secrets. I passed the water heater, the Christmas bins, the pile of broken picture frames we never got around to hanging. The furnace crouched in the corner, pilot light dead. I knelt to inspect it and saw something glinting between the cinder blocks behind it. Not paper this time, metal. A tin box, thin and dented, tucked just behind the lowest pipe. I tugged it loose. It was heavier than it looked. Inside, folded pages, dozens, tightly creased, some on lined notebook paper, others torn from envelopes and receipts. A few had smudges that looked like oil or blood. It wasn't just notes now. It was a kind of journal. I read the first entry right there on the cold concrete, back pressed to the furnace. If I disappear for a while, I hope she thinks it's because I'm working, not because I'm hiding from the bottle. My father used to say he could see rage in me like a red thread. Said it would strangle anything I loved if I didn't learn to cut it. I didn't learn. My breath caught. The next few pages were sharper. Spirals of guilt and self-loathing, sudden turns of tenderness, descriptions of me, my laugh, my eyes in the morning, my hands when I braided the twins' hair. Then, one I almost couldn't read. I love her enough to want her to run. When I came upstairs, the tin can journal was pressed tight to my chest. The twins were watching cartoons. I told them I needed a moment. Locked myself in the bathroom, sat on the edge of the tub, and kept reading. Every line carved a groove through me. This wasn't a man who didn't know what he was doing. This was a man who knew exactly how much damage he caused and did it anyway. And that truth knocked the air from my lungs. Aaron came home that night smelling like smoke and peppermint schnapps. He kissed my cheek and called me beautiful. Told the twins a story about the time Daddy rode a motorcycle with no brakes. Laughed too loud at his own punchlines. I watched him like he was a photograph that had started to fade. Later, when the kids were asleep, he came up behind me in the kitchen, wrapped his arms around my waist. I didn't flinch. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I had trained myself not to. "You've been quiet," he murmured. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions about the notes, the journal, the man who seemed to live inside him, scribbling truths while the others shouted lies. But all I said was, "Do you remember when we first moved in?" He leaned his chin on my shoulder, nuzzled my neck. "Course I do. You had that ugly green couch." I smiled without feeling it. "You were drinking then, weren't you?" He pulled back, just slightly. "What are you talking about? You hid it well." He stared at me like I'd spoken in another language, then laughed, sharp and hollow. "Don't start, Mira. You always rewrite things to make me the villain." And just like that, he walked away. I stood there alone for a long time, my hands still damp from the dishes. Somewhere in the house, under my bed, the journal waited. A man's truth, written in the dark. But the man in my kitchen? He didn't recognize his own handwriting. I didn't sleep. I lay on top of the covers, the journal splayed open across my chest like a second set of lungs. The house was quiet, except for the twins' soft breathing through the wall and the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Aaron was still out. Or maybe he was asleep in the recliner. It didn't matter. I could smell the liquor he'd been sweating out for years, even through the floorboards. I rose just before dawn and padded barefoot into the kitchen. I laid every note out on the table, one after the other, smoothing them flat with my palm. In the dim light, they looked like feathers from some strange bird. Confessions, apologies, rage, layer after layer of a man I'd been trying to understand for decades. One at the very end caught me. A page I'd missed before, crumpled at the bottom of the tin box. If I hurt her, I hope she leaves. If she leaves, I hope I die. I stared at that line until my vision blurred. I whispered it out loud, just to hear it in the air. I hope she leaves. The sound of a door opening broke my trance. He was back. Aaron stumbled into the kitchen, shirt untucked, eyes red-rimmed, but bright with some brittle humor. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Planning a yard sale?" He glanced at the papers on the table, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, then anger, then that slick, familiar smile. "You been snooping." I didn't answer. I slid the last note toward him like an offering. He didn't even look down. "Those are nothing. Old scraps. Drunk talk. You know how I get." His voice sharpened. "Why you digging through my shit, huh? Trying to make me out like my old man?" I heard the twins shifting upstairs. One coughed. I kept my voice low. "You already are." He slammed his hand on the table. The notes jumped, fluttered. "You think you're better than me?" His breath was sour. "All your little secrets. All your little looks. You're the one with the problem, Mira. You." He grabbed a mug from the counter and hurled it at the sink. It shattered, ceramic shards scattering like teeth. The sound woke the twins. Footsteps padded at the top of the stairs. Something in me went still. I straightened, stepped back from the table, and said, calm, quiet, almost gentle, "Go upstairs, babies. Put your headphones on." Tiny feet scurried. A door shut. Aaron was still breathing heavy, like an engine trying to stall. "We're not done," he hissed. "Yes," I said, my voice so soft it startled even me. "We are." I moved past him, steady, toward the hallway closet. My bag was already there, half packed for weeks, in case of fire or storm or something unnamed. I took it, walked to the door. He reached for my arm but stopped. Maybe at the look on my face, maybe at the weight of his own note on the table. His hand hung in the air, empty. "You're just gonna walk out?" His voice cracked. "After everything?" I opened the door. The first slice of morning sunlight hit my cheek. I held his gaze for a beat, then said, "You wrote it yourself," and I stepped out. On the bus, I sat by the window, bag at my feet, the city rising around me. In my lap lay one note I'd taken from the pile, folded twice, edges soft from being handled. I read it again. "I love her enough to want her to run." The bus lurched forward. The sun spilled over the rooftops, warm on my face. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch. The bus hummed like a low prayer as it rolled out of the neighborhood. Houses blurred past in the window. The corner store with the peeling mural. The playground where the twins had their first scraped knees. The church Aaron never wanted to attend. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass and let it all pass like scenes from a film I was finally walking out of. The twins sat 2 rows ahead, earbuds in, their small heads tilting against each other. My grown children had called last night, sensing something in my voice. I'd said only, soon. Now, soon had arrived. A different life was moving toward me, whether I felt ready or not. I opened my bag and took out the single note I'd kept. The paper had grown soft from being folded and unfolded so many times. I read the line again, silently mouthing each word. "I love her enough to want her to run." I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Then I folded it one last time and slipped it into my wallet behind the photo of my oldest at graduation. I didn't need the other notes anymore. I didn't need his handwriting to tell me who I was. The driver called the next stop. A burst of sunlight spilled through the aisle, catching in the beads on my daughter's braids, glinting off the window pane. It made the dust dance like gold. I straightened. My shoulders hurt from years of hunching. I rolled them back until I could feel my spine again. The bus doors hissed open. The twins looked back at me, waiting. I stood and took their hands. The world smelled of rain and exhaust, but it was mine. I stepped down onto the sidewalk, the first warm wind of the day curling around my face. Aaron's house, that house, was already shrinking in the distance. It would keep shrinking until it was small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. Until it was gone. I squeezed my children's fingers. I wasn't sure where we were going yet, only that we were going. For the first time in years, my body moved without rehearsing. My breath filled my chest like an opening door. And when a car backfired somewhere down the block, I didn't even flinch. What you heard is one chapter of a much greater journey. MIRA'S Reflections is now available in its entirety. You can purchase or download MIRA'S Reflections by Meek Banks, now available on Amazon.com. This has been Stories by Meek Banks. New stories are added regularly. Make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. You can find more at meekbanks.com.